right? These bones. And they erect it out and they giggle and they laugh and they point at it. Only they come to a different conclusion. They come to the conclusion that the thing they found, they already know what it is because it's still around, okay? Hypothetically, this thing's still around. So they have camels and they have this smaller thing that looks like a camel. They're both available to them in real time right now. Now, I'm asking you a question right now. When you find this smaller camel-looking thing in the ground, and it looks like the larger camel-looking thing, how do you use the observation called similarity, right, in phenotype? How do you come to the conclusion that one came from the other merely from similarity?
We compare it to all of the other evidence that we have showing similarity between other species as well, and we look at the
Craig FTFE fight the flat Earth fails at trying to debate evolution. Made by Jim Bob here went head to head with Craig and completely made a fool out of him. But what do you expect from Craig, who I've never seen a good debate from? Apparently he's good at debating flat earthers, but I mean, I think even a 7-year-old could debate a flat earther and win. Not exactly a high achievement there. Jim Bob, though, master debater, and I think he'll have no trouble owning Craig in this debate. Let's see Jim Bob debate Craig on evolution here on Modern Day Debates.
Okay, so we now have a scientific theory. Yeah, it's part of it, but you were like, well, it's the product of the scientific method, which is just kind of a misinterpretation. And
well, I'm asked, I want to just clarify, is it possible to develop a scientific theory without the scientific method?
Scientific method is what you use to try and falsify a hypothesis. So if you want to have a hypothesis in your scientific theory, then you need to use the scientific method to get to that. But you're saying, right, is this one thing that slots in here? You're not understanding what the scientific method is. The scientific method isn't just a thing that slots
Craig, you didn't
in
answer.
as part. Yeah, let me finish what I'm saying. The scientific method isn't just the scientific method isn't just something that slots in as part of this or that. It is a process. It is a tool. So all I'm saying is it's incorrect to say the scientific theory is just a product of the scientific method.
I didn't say just.
You did. That was the word you said.
Craig.
But anyway, I just wanted to clear that up.
You're gish galloping.
No, I'm literally not. I just wanted to clear that up. And Jim Bob, when I give you an explanation, you say I'm gish galloping. That's not my fault. You don't understand.
Let me know when
you're done. Did directly answer your question.
The question.
Craig always does that whenever someone like responds to something he's saying or accuses him of gish galloping or something. He always goes, "It's not my fault. Like, you didn't understand what I was trying to say." Like, it's always the other person's fault. They didn't understand Craig's genius.
Can you produce a scientific theory without the scientific method? I didn't get a clear answer on that. I'll put it in premise form, Craig.
I've already answered that. Asked and answered.
Interrupting.
Asked and answered. We can move on because I've asked and answered that. Yeah.
Okay. Yes or no? Yes or no?
I'm just saying I've asked and answered.
Okay. Keep interrupting.
One at a time, gentlemen. I have to break it into 1 or 2 minute segments.
I absolutely refuse
Hold on a second.
to continually answer the same
question.
question.
I'm going to break it into 1 or 2 minute segments. Okay, just gonna. Okay. Who asked the most recent question?
I'm asking a question, and it's a yes or no question, and I didn't get an answer, and so I'll ask it a different way.
Answered.
Okay.
Okay. Wait. Hold on 1 sec. Okay, Craig, you feel like you answered it?
Yes, my entire spiel that I just gave there answered the question, so now the conversation can move on. If Jim Bob wants to continually answer the question, ask the question over and over, I will just say asked and answered. That's it.
We just want to, just to see, okay, so you're saying, all you have to say is just, yep, I answered it.
And okay, I'm
gonna. I've answered
Jim,
it.
Okay, all right, I'll just take the.
You guys honestly are just, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but need you to take a deep breath. So what we're going to do is break it into 1 minute segments. All right, so Craig said that he answered it. So Jim Bob will give you a chance for 60 seconds uninterrupted. Floor is all yours. Let's see. So I'm just click ask to unmute so that way you can speak. So there should be a little window that pops up on your Zoom window.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, ready for it.
Okay, well, in all of those words, I'm going to take it as a yes, that a scientific theory needs to actually go through the scientific method. Otherwise, what are we talking about? Further, if there's two hypotheses, I would argue that the only way to arbitrate between two competing hypotheses is exactly that, the experiment, which is the scientific method. So the reason I asked Craig, is a scientific theory something that has to be at the tail end of the scientific method? And I didn't get a clear answer on that.
Asked and answered.
You're just gonna please answer it again for the audience.
No, I've refused to answer questions.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine if you don't want to answer. Okay, so
no, I've already answered it, and everybody heard me answer it, Jim Bob.
Okay.
If you didn't understand the answer, that's a you problem.
Okay, would you say that evolution is a scientific theory?
It 100% is a scientific theory. It's a stone cold brilliant definition of a scientific
Beautiful.
theory. Would you like me to explain to you how it is a scientific theory?
No, not really.
Well, no, in fact, I'm gonna explain how it's a scientific theory.
This is my cross-examination.
God, Craig is the worst. Craig can't just answer a simple question. He has to go on like 20-minute, 30-minute monologues just to answer a simple question. Craig, we don't need your monologues, dude. Just answer the question. Simple. You're not here to debate yourself.
To me,
No, this is a cross-examination.
No, there's no cross-examination. You asked the question.
There's no cross-examination of your affirmative position?
You've just asked the question, and I'm going to answer it.
It's a series of questions.
I do apologize that the beginning of your sentence.
He's not allowing me to run a line of questions.
So why is evolution a scientific theory?
All right, gentlemen. So I do. We could do this where it's a cross exam where each of you gets 10 minutes to ask the other questions.
I didn't agree to a
Craig, I'm not done with my sentence. For crying out loud! If I'm still in the middle of a sentence, can you allow me to finish my sentence?
Jim Bob appears to be trying to run the debate.
Gosh, what is wrong with you? All right. If I'm still talking, like, why are you? I'm gonna just start talking while James is midway half sentence. Like, shut your trap and let me finish. So both of you. We're going to do 10 minutes of cross-exam. That's one theoretical. We could keep going with open dialogue, but it seems like neither of you really wants to allow the other to ask a series of questions. We could do 1-minute segments. Just back and forth, 60 seconds for one guy, 60 seconds for the other. What are you guys wanting to do?
Well,
I'd very much like an open conversation if Jim Bob is willing to.
Okay, we got you. Yep. Open conversation. That's the answer, not the if Jim Bob is blah, blah, blah. All right, Jim Bob, short answer. What do you want to do?
If it's an open conversation, in conversations in debates, have questions, have cross-examination in the conversation. So if I'm going to ask a question.
What do you want to do, Jim Bob?
I want to cross-examine his affirmative, which is a fucking debate. That's what a fucking debate is.
You want to cross-examine. Great. Okay. So it sounds like you guys are not willing to meet in the middle. Like, Craig, are you willing to do any sort of cross-exam?
Yeah. If we can actually, agree on some terms. The problem is that Jim Bob is trying to define
how
terms.
long?
Yeah.
You want to get a fucking debate on? Like, let's go.
Yeah, no, I'm cool. That's what I want. I want the debate. That's why I'm saying let's just have the debate. But Jim Bob doesn't want to.
You guys
really?
So what we're gonna do is we'll do 5 minutes where Jim will ask questions. Jim Bob will ask questions to Craig, and then we'll switch it. Where Craig will ask questions to Jim Bob for 5 minutes. Fair?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
We'll just
Does
keep
that
going
mean I
back and
get
forth?
to answer the questions though? That's the thing.
If they're yes or no, yes.
No.
Here we go.
Questions
5
can always
minutes.
be yes or no.
The timer is set. Jim Bob,
Okay.
now's your chance to ask questions.
Okay,
to Craig.
Craig, you said that evolution is a scientific theory. Okay. Would you say evolution, being a scientific theory, can be run through the scientific method?
100% yes.
Okay. So if evolution can be run through the scientific method, can you give me the observation that you start with?
Let me see. I've got it all written down here. Observation: bacteria sometimes develop new traits or resistance under pressure.
Okay. And so if the scientific method asks a question about what you're observing bacteria do a thing, and then what's the question you're asking in the scientific method about that observation?
Can we observe evolution happening in a lab environment across generations?
No, that's another observation. You're
No,
restarting.
it's not. No,
Yes,
no,
it
no,
is.
it's not. It's a question.
Can we observe is an observation, Craig.
Yes, it's a question. Is it a question? Has a question mark at the end.
Okay,
Therefore, Jim
okay.
Bob, it is
Enough.
a
Yeah,
question.
wait, but
Enough.
didn't he ask?
No, not
Didn't he
enough. I'm
ask?
in the
Can
middle
we
of talking,
observe?
Jim Bob.
Yes,
Jim,
I said
yes.
this,
Yeah,
James.
Jim Bob, no,
Dude,
sorry,
dude,
I'm answering the
stop.
question.
You're
I
not
haven't
asking
finished
the
answering-
question.
I'm answering the question. I'm trying to answer the question. If you could allow me the courtesy of answering the question
Okay,
to you.
go ahead. Like,
Yeah.
you're burning up
Yeah.
time. Can you observe?
Yeah. Can you observe evolution happening
Why are
in a
you
lab
asking the
environment
question? It's been
across
asked 3 times.
generations?
Just
That is a
directly to
question.
the answer.
So in the scientific method, the observation is the beginning. Then you ask a question about the phenomenon you're observing. Notice when I asked Craig what, because you're leading to the hypothesis, what causes the phenomenon you're observing. Notice when I asked what the question is, Craig went back to another observational question. No, he's back at he's back at the start of the scientific method.
No, incorrect. The question can be an observation. It doesn't need to not be an observation.
Right.
The question can be, oh, can I see this happening? That can absolutely be a question.
Yeah, that's
The
another question.
Can also, the question can also be, why is this happening?
Yeah,
The question could be whatever I want it to be, Jim Bob. You don't understand how the scientific method works. Now, the next step would be the
so
hypothesis.
much gish galloping.
No, I'm in the middle of talking. The next step would be a hypothesis. The hypothesis would be, if E. coli has grown for thousands of generations, it will evolve to become better adapted to its environment. That is a direct hypothesis coming from the question that was answered. The next step from that would be making a prediction based on the hypothesis. You can shake your head all you like, but I'm the one with the physics degree. The next step would, after the hypothesis, is you can make a prediction. The prediction would be, if I put the E. coli in a solution that would stop it being able to breed itself because of poison, then
So if you poison something and it dies, that's evolution. Dude,
I haven't finished my sentence.
You're
Here's the thing,
gish
Jim Bob.
galloping, bro.
I hadn't finished my sentence.
You're
I'm going to finish
gish
what I'm saying.
galloping a story.
No, I'm not. If I'm going to finish what I'm saying, and that's the problem. You listen to half of what I said.
You're just.
Right?
I want my time back.
The prediction is, if I put the E. coli in a solution that is poisonous to it, will it evolve to adapt to be able to overcome that poisonous solution?
That's a different. That's a different hypothesis than evolution.
No, it's not.
Yes,
that
it
is a prediction from the hypothesis.
Let me answer. Dude, this is absurd, James. This is absurd, dude.
We're gonna go to the next. We're gonna go. All right. What's your question, Jim Bob, that you'd like to ask?
I wanted Craig to take me through one observation to a hypothesis.
I'm doing that. I'm literally
Craig,
doing that.
Craig, shut up so we can actually get this. I'm just giving Jim Bob a chance to say what he was asking.
I want a simple observation that leads to a hypothesis. Craig went from observing one thing to then introducing poison, okay? Observing.
That's a prediction.
Can you control yourself? That's a different observation, dude.
It's not. It's a prediction.
That for a different observation.
No, for the same observation.
Okay, so naturally, in natural science, do you see bacteria getting poisoned? Do you in natural? Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Okay,
that's what medication is.
That's a different observation than you originally said.
Not.
Yes, it is.
Right. If you will give me just 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Oh, let's just give you 5 minutes.
Method.
Yeah. Give me.
Right.
2 minutes. Oh my gosh, Craig, just stop.
If you want me to go, you asked me the question, Jim Bob. Can I take you through the scientific method with an observation?
Yeah.
I am doing exactly that.
What's the observation?
The observation is bacteria sometimes develops new traits or resistances under pressure.
That's great.
Do we agree?
Great. That's an observation. Great. Now the next question in the scientific method is, what causes that?
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
What else would the question be?
The question doesn't have to be what causes that.
What's the hypothesis?
A question that comes after.
Yeah,
you not let me Jim Bob, you ask me a question, you don't let me answer. So you ask the question, what is the question? The question is, can we observe
more observation
evolution happening in a lab experiment across generations? Right? That is the question I have developed from my observation. Now we have the hypothesis. The hypothesis is, if E. coli is grown for thousands of generations, it will evolve to become better adapted to environment.
No.
That is a logical progression from the observation, question, hypothesis.
Craig.
The next part is the prediction. The
Unbelievable.
prediction is if you put the E. coli in a solution that is poisonous to it, it will adapt to the pressures and
Okay.
overcome the poison. The
Okay.
next step is the experiment. And this experiment has been going on since 1988 and is still ongoing
Adaptation-
today. Is in fact the longest,
Craig.
the longest
Gish gallop,
ongoing
dude.
experiment.
It's a gish
I
gallop
said 2
king.
minutes. You said you'd give me 2 minutes.
So
not
adaptation,
gish galloping, answering the question.
Craig, observing adaptation and calling it evolution are two different
That is
things.
evolution. No, it's not.
Then why are you using
No,
different words?
Adaptation is part of evolution. Adaptation is evolution.
hold on.
Evolution is
Dude, you
adapting
gotta let
to
me
your
talk, dude.
environment.
James, this is
Hold on.
insane. This is insane.
You asked
We
me
do
a
have to
question,
have
I
the
get to
actual
answer.
questions. So
Yeah.
what was your question, JB?
If adaptation is one thing and evolution is a different thing, then you can't make them synonymous exactly, okay? So when you say I watch something adapt, you're watching something at the local level adapt, like change to some sort of inputs, okay? This is not what's in question tonight. What's in question tonight is some sort of transmutation. It's some sort of macro change back in time, evolution, the story of evolution, of how animals and populations diversified over time at the macro, large scale animals, sexual selection, all of that, right? We're not looking at a petri dish. All you're doing for the audience is saying, I looked at something change and react to stimuli, therefore what?
Okay, so there is no difference between macro and micro evolution. Evolution is evolution. You trying to separate them is a disingenuous tactic used by evolution deniers, right? It's not a difference. The fact that it can happen in a short time or a long time is the same thing. The evidence of it happening is that we can make it happen in a short time. We can also go to the London Underground mosquitoes, who literally became a different species, unable to interbreed with other mosquitoes within decades.
Why are you calling it a mosquito?
I'm in the middle of a sentence.
So it's a mosquito, but not a
I'm in
mosquito?
the middle of a sentence. Because of the pressures of the environment they are. Evolution is literally adapting to environmental pressures. That is the definition of evolution. Adaptation is part of the process.
Okay.
I disagree. Evolution is becoming something where adapting is just to learning to live with something. So for instance, like evolution is becoming something new, like evolving into something new and different, where adapting is just dealing with like a situation at a given time. So for instance, if it's cold outside and I put a jacket on, I didn't evolve into like a natural jacket wearing human. I adapted to the cold by putting on the jacket. Or I just stay inside and turn the heater on to adapt to the cold outside. You know, adapting is more short term and doesn't change your genetic makeup. Revolution is long term and it does change your genetic makeup. So for instance, if I naturally just grew if I was always around the cold, and so then I grew a thick coat of hair, that like fur, that kept me warm outside, and then my future generations of children just naturally grew out this fur coat, that would be evolution. So yes, while they're related, they're not the same thing. They're not interchangeable.
Greg, if adaptation and observing adaptation at the local level is evolution, why would you need to produce an experiment if the observation is identical to the term evolution, dummy?
Because we have to test a hypothesis, dummy.
No, look, do you understand the problem you're in?
There is no problem. I have no problem. You are the one that doesn't understand evolution. You are the one that is disingenuously trying to separate macro and micro evolution like they're different things.
Where we basically break this up. Craig, you have 5 minutes to ask questions of Jim Bob.
Okay. I mean, I'm here to offer evidence for evolution, but Jim Bob is trying to separate the things. So I don't really have questions for him because I was here to answer his questions about evolution.
You mean a cross-examination?
He hasn't authored an alternative to evolution.
That's
Craig earlier denied a cross-examination, saying, I don't want to answer your questions now. I don't want a cross-examination. And now he's like, well, I'm here to answer questions about evolution. Oh, okay. Just like what Jim Bob was trying to do earlier.
So, no, it's not. It's part of the debate. There's no question begging there.
Look, okay.
In a debate,
oh my gosh, dude.
I'm talking. In a debate, both parties have to present evidence for their case, right? My case is evolution is real. I presented evidence for that. Jim Bob hasn't presented evidence for an alternative, so I
this
don't
is
know
more
how
like
to ask
this
for
is
it.
more like this is more like your more opening statement, but this is a good time to ask questions to Jim Bob.
Yeah, that's the point. I don't have any questions for Jim Bob because he hasn't presented an alternative for me to cross-examine. So if Jim Bob could present an alternative to evolution, then I could absolutely 100% ask him questions about that alternative. The thing is, I don't know what his position is, apart from I don't understand evolution. I have evidence for evolution, and I can explain evolution to him, but he's not even accepting the fact that evolution, there's no difference between micro and macro. He's just going, oh, well, that's different, and I say it's different. I mean, what questions can I ask him?
Yeah, tell me when you're done.
Jim Bob, present your case for an alternative to evolution.
Well, first of all, presenting an alternative would appeal to the scientific method, being that the only arbiter for two competing hypotheses is an experiment in natural science. But if I can't even make, if you can't even take me, take evolution through the scientific method, dude, I'm talking.
But if I did that. Did you not remember? I literally did that just now.
He can't control himself.
No, I'm just saying, Jim Bob, I did that just now. Do you not remember?
Okay, so Craig also just said that observing adaptation at the bacterial level is observing evolution. If observation of adaptation is identical to evolution, then you're observing the theory that you're trying to prove by just naming it evolution. Now, if all you had to do, Craig, is observe bacteria, you wouldn't need to craft a scientific theory because your observation is literally the name of the theory, evolution.
If you just want to make assumptions, yeah, but the fact is in science, we like to observe something, ask a question about it, form a hypothesis, predict from that hypothesis, and then test that hypothesis, because we don't just go, oh, we saw a thing, we saw it happening, so therefore that's that. As in science, we like to go through the scientific method. And Jim Bob, you are lying to everybody watching right now by saying I couldn't take you through the scientific method when I did exactly that. You not understanding the scientific method and disagreeing with the scientific method is a you problem.
Okay, cool. So this is the thing. If observing bacteria change and react to stimuli is evolution, then it's unnecessary to craft a hypothesis or a theory because you're literally observing the thing you're calling evolution everywhere.
No, it's not, because you do that to do science. You don't just go, oh, well, I'm observing.
That's big brain stuff.
I'm talking. You don't just do it. You don't just look at it and go, well, that's that. Even if you think you've observed the thing happening and you call it that thing, you still do tests on that thing to make sure it is that thing. You go through the scientific method, like I have with you many times already, Jim Bob, and you have just denied it.
Okay. Here, let's take a different approach here. Let's take like a cat. Okay. A cat, would you agree that a cat is a sort of universal category of an animal?
A cat is a universal category of an animal.
Yeah, a cat's not a dog, right?
Well, no, a cat's not a dog.
Okay,
it's a cat's genetically separate species.
Gotcha. Was there a time under the evolutionary view where a cat, as we know it today, actually wasn't a cat? It just didn't exist?
Yes, cats and dogs and you and I all have common ancestors.
Okay, so if the common ancestor for a cat was one thing, how do you look at bacteria changing and come to the conclusion that there was once an animal that's not a cat, that the splintering from, the fractioning from became a cat, where a cat emerged from this process? How do you extrapolate the one to the other?
We look at the evidence we have, which is the fossil records that we do have, even if they're not 100% complete. We look at what we do have, we form hypotheses from all the information that we have, and we go, well, if this is what we think evolution is, then we can test it and see that we can change a species. Now, when you put E. coli into a solution that is poisonous to it, it literally becomes a different species of E. coli with different DNA and different attributes to survive within that solution that was previously poisonous to it.
Dude,
I'm in the middle. If you want me to get through an explanation,
you can't gish gallop, bro.
No, it's not gish galloping. It is me having an explanation, Jim Bob. But the problem is, you don't let me get to the end and then interrupt.
What did I ask you?
Just be quiet. You asked me if I can explain to you how we can have, well, what was before a cat and say, well, there's now a cat, and then relate
That's
that
not what
to
I asked you.
bacteria.
Okay, yeah.
Yes,
so,
it is.
Now, more clearly, how do you look at the local level of change, which I call adaptation to external stimuli, right?
Evolution. That's what evolution is.
Stop. How do you look at that event and then extrapolate that a cat, right, through fossils now, how do you extrapolate that a cat comes from things that are not cats?
Because we look at the fossils that we do have, the
How?
fossils that don't. What do you mean, how? We take fossils.
You just look
and
at
we
them?
look at. Am I allowed to answer the question? Right, Jimbo, you know when you ask a question, that's when you stop talking and let the other person speak. Cool. So, yes, we look at fossils, we examine them, we compare them to other skeletons and stuff that we have of different creatures. We compare them to other fossil records that we have. We do experiments on the DNA and stuff that we have within them, and we compare them to what is now, and we make inferences. And we use that as part of our hypothesis to then form predictions and do tests. Now, here's the thing. We don't have time machines, so we can't go back in time and test something for millions of years. But what we can do is start an experiment like there was one started in 1988 to continually test the hypothesis of evolution being adaptation to environmental pressures, right? You keep disingenuously trying to separate adaptation to environmental pressures from evolution. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, so when I asked you, how do you do this? You basically said you look at fossils, and then you said a bunch of other things, and you said you do tests.
Correct,
Nothing,
I said a bunch of things.
It's my turn. Nothing in what you just said explained how you come to the conclusion, the extrapolation, by the way, an assertion.
Oh, no, it did.
Dude, let me talk. I just let you ramble. Shut up.
No, you're lying, though.
Shut
just
up.
All right. I do have to jump in here. Craig, I know that I said something like shut the fuck up earlier or whatever it was. I do want to ask, let's allow Jim Bob to finish this point. I promise we will come back to you, Craig.
It's annoying, isn't it, Jim Bob, when people keep interrupting? It's really annoying, isn't it?
So when you find a fossil, let's call it a cat fossil, Craig. So that's a new observation now, right? So you found this thing and you bring it out of the ground. And now it's your job for the audience to tell me, how did you hold this fossil in your hand and come to the conclusion that a cat that we see today comes from this changing process of this fossil? Please tell us.
I already answered that, but I guess I'll answer it again because you like asking the same question multiple times. So we look at the fossil and we compare it to the fossil records that we have. We compare it to cats that exist today. We compare it to other big cats. We compare it to the skeletons of cats that we find mummified. And we look at the lineage and we go, well, that looks like that. And there's bits that change. Well, then there's bits that look like this different. That shows this adaptation. And then what we also do is we compare the time of the fossils to what was happening in the world at the time. So we could look at, say, a larger cat fossil, and then maybe a little bit later there is a smaller cat fossil, right? And then we look at, well, why would that happen? Well, maybe at that time there was a drought in the world, there was less resources available, so the proto-cat becoming smaller as an adaptation to the environmental pressures was something that would be suitable. And then we keep comparing it to all the fossil records that we have and compare those fossil records to the current cats that exist. And we make the inference that this comes from this, this, from this. And then to test the fact that species can change, we do experiments like the one that has been going on since 1988. So please don't ask the same question again.
That's amazing. So you told a story about what you think happened based on similarity. Hold on. If I find a fossil that looks like something today, I'll call this hypothetical camel world for the sake of simplicity, okay? Right now, someone digs up an animal and it looks like a camel, but it's smaller. And voila, they say, wow, this is very similar. They come to the conclusion because they use your methodology of fairy tale telling, and they say it must have the camel we see today must have come from this camel because it's smaller and they're similar. Okay, the observation is actually similarities, a similarity of one thing you found with something that you observed today. That's the observation. Actually, that's not the conclusion. Now, in another part of the world, Craig, track with me here. Another, let's say a Peruvian community finds the same exact type of fossil, right? These bones, and they erect it out and they giggle and they laugh and they point at it. Only they come to a different conclusion. They come to the conclusion that the thing they found, they already know what it is because it's still around, okay? Hypothetically, this thing's still around. So they have camels and they have this smaller thing that looks like a camel. They're both available to them in real time right now. Now, I'm asking you a question right now. When you find this smaller camel-looking thing in the ground, and it looks like the larger camel-looking thing, how do you use the observation called similarity, right, in phenotype? How do you come to the conclusion that one came from the other merely from similarity?
We compare it to all of the other evidence that we have showing similarity between other species as well, and we look at the
Jim Bob is about to lose his mind here. This feels like, I bet Jimbo feels like he's serving some sort of sentence for something, like he's serving time for some sort of punishment, some sort of crime that he committed or something. I think that should be an option, to be honest. Just be locked in a cell with Craig, and you have to listen to Craig. You have to have a conversation. You have to have a debate with Craig. You know, do that for a year, and then that's your time served. What do you think about this debate so far, though? Leave a comment in the comment section below. Give this video a like if you're liking it so far. Let's see how Jim Bob does. Let's see if he could survive.
transition between one thing and another. Yes, all fossils are transitional. That's something
you look at the thing you're assuming.
No, did you not? Okay.
How do you prove transition?
Maybe
you
if
said
you
look
let
at
me,
transition.
if you don't interrupt me with your assumptions of what I'm saying, right, Jim Bob. Okay, here's what I'm going to do.
How do you prove
right?
transition? You look
Here's
at transition.
What I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do is
Science.
I'm gonna try and answer the question, and you're going to shut up. Right, you do comparative anatomy. You study the skeletal structure, skull shape, jaw configuration, teeth, spine, paws. Cats have unique traits like retractable claws, a specific carnassial tooth shape, a certain vertebrae flexibilities. If the proto-cat's bones share these hallmarks, then we can make an inference. You do genetic analysis, if available. Rare, but if there's DNA preserved, e.g. in Ice Age fossils, scientists compare it to modern feline genomes. Even degraded DNA can be partially reconstructed to find common markers. 3, you can use morphogenics. Use 3D imaging or digital calipers to measure bone proportions and angles. Run statistical comparisons with modern species to see how closely they line up. 4, fossil stratigraphy and dating. Date the fossil using radiometric techniques like carbon dating, uranium series, etc. Compare it to the timeline of known cat evolution. Does it fall in an area where cat ancestors were developing? Then it fits in the family photo. 5, biology. Location matters. Did this proto-cat live in a region where early fields evolved or spread? Fossils found along migration routes of early cats confirm ancestry. 6, phylogenetic analysis. Build a family tree using traits and or genetic data. See where the proto-cat fits among big cats, small cats, and other feline forms. If
Dude,
it branches
James,
off,
James,
you want,
James.
if you want,
he's reading ChatGPT right now. This is insane.
You wanted me to tell you.
You're
then let me
reading
fucking
us
tell
an
you.
essay, dude. You don't even know this shit. You're reading it from
You wanted me to.
ChatGPT.
You wanted me to
jump
read it. You wanted me
into-
to tell you. Then let me tell
reading,
you.
dude.
All right.
Oh, sorry, am I not allowed to read the thing
You're
that
not
you
allowed to
asked
have
me to tell you?
ChatGPT debate for you, dude.
I'm not using ChatGPT. You want me to tell you the thing you've asked me to?
I'm
then
using
let
Grok.
me tell you.
Look,
If
it was very
it sounds
simple.
like it's from ChatGPT,
No, no,
then
no.
who cares,
Dude,
right?
hold
It's
on
the
one
thing
sec.
you asked for.
Hold on
Unbelievable.
one sec. I do want to just jump in because it is fair that there's two ways to look at it. One is, Craig is going to share as many points as he can that are relevant to the question. And then likewise, at some point, if Jim Bob wants to jump in and say like, okay, that's good enough, like 3 or 4 examples or something, like that's reasonable too. So, what was the exact question, Jim Bob? Did you tell him that?
The question was this: if you find some bones that are similar to something that exists, the reason I use the analogy of the Peruvian group is that it could. How do you know that an animal just didn't die out that could have just as well lived alongside the camel that looks similar to it? Do we see animals today that look similar to other animals that aren't the same animals? Yes. So the question of finding something and thinking in your head, well, this thing that exists today must have come from that thing, doesn't tell us whether or not that thing could have just as well died out. And if it lived, it could have lived alongside of the thing that it looks like. So I'm asking Craig, what methodology does he use to determine the thing he found didn't just die out and could have lived similar alongside the similar thing, or that the similarities itself draws out this extrapolated transition between one and the other. And he can't give me an answer. Why? Because the whole thing is conjecture.
Jim Bob's absolutely correct there. That's what I understood his question to be, which is just like, how do you know that this thing came from this other thing and not just they lived they lived around the same time? You know, if you find the bones of, you know, if you're always around tigers and you find the bones of a tiger, but then there's a random smaller cat, a bobcat or something like that, why is it assumed that, well, this evolved from there and not just, you know, they're just two different types of cat?
Okay, I'm going to say 9 things that answer your question.
Oh, 9.
Right?
Just 9?
Yes. Just 9, right?
Only
But
9.
It
Only
answered
9.
your question. So if you
Let's go one at a
answer
time.
your question,
One
you're
at a
a
time.
liar.
No, one at a time.
Comparative and that. No, I'm going to just
No,
list
one
the
at a
9 if you're
time.
going to listen.
No,
No,
one
I'm
at
going
a
to
time.
list the 9. I'm going
No,
to list the 9.
this is bullshit.
Comparative anatomy, genetic analysis, morphogenetics, fossil stratigraphy and dating, biogeography, phylogenetic analysis, unique shared derived traits, transitional features, pathology, and wear patterns. Those all answer your question specifically.
No, it doesn't. That lists
Yes,
things.
it does. Yes, it does.
Craig, did you just
You
list
can cry
things?
all you like. I just answered your question.
Craig, did your 9 things you listed?
Craig. Say the fucking name right. Craig.
No, Craig. That's how I talk. That's how I talk. I can't change my...
Craig? No one says Craig like Craig. We pronounce it like Craig. Hey, Craig, how's it going? Oh, you want Jenny Craig? We don't go Jenny Craig. Hey, Craig.
mouth.
We have to.
So, but
all right,
that's
let's
not
get
my
focused.
name.
Craig, the things
That's
you
not my
listed,
name.
the things you listed, nothing, you didn't explain the answer to my question. You just listed things that you think answer the question. You didn't actually answer the
they
question.
do answer the question. If you don't like the answer, that's your problem.
You
I've
just
answered the
listed
question.
things.
I also explained them previously, but you cried that I was explaining them.
Name the first one.
The comparative anatomy.
Okay, you compare things. That's what I asked.
Yes.
How do you determine something that looks similar? How do you determine that it comes from the thing?
If organisms can adapt to pressures in environment, right? That is what our assertion is from all of the evidence that we've got, is that organisms adapt to pressures in their environment. So that is our hypothesis. So we have to try and falsify that hypothesis in a way that we can. And the most conclusive way that I've seen of trying to falsify that hypothesis is the E. coli test that's been going on since 1988, where they got a particular strain of E. coli that was resistant to most things, and they created a solution that would destroy it, right? And over time, the stronger bits of that E. coli were the ones that survived and propagated, adapted to that environmental pressure, so then they increase the strength of the resistant thing, and it goes on and on. That is how we test that hypothesis.
Okay, hold on. Isn't it possible, logically and practically, for E. coli reacting and overcoming stimuli? Isn't it possible that that could exist and be true, and a proto-cat isn't true?
We don't know. This is the way that we test our hypothesis. Well, our hypothesis.
Well, here's the thing: even if the E. coli, the part of the strand of the E. coli is adapting to the poison, the question should be then: is this a new strand of E. coli? And the thing is, too, now that this E. coli can survive in this particular poison, does it only survive in that poison? Can I put it into a petri dish with non-poison, and can it survive there? Like, is this more of a question of adaptation? Or did it evolve into a new strand of E. coli? It brings up a whole new series of questions. And I think that's what Jim Bob's trying to get at here, but Craig isn't understanding.
The reason we did that test is because of our hypothesis of evolution.
I'm going to ask it again. You're not answering the question. So if
Yes, it is possible that that exists without that being a thing. But the point is that is our test of that hypothesis.
And that doesn't. No, that's a contradiction.
No, it's not. We are simply no, it's not. We are simply testing the hypothesis of if organisms adapt to environmental pressures, because that's what we are claiming evolution is. We're not claiming. Hold on. We're not claiming that evolution is some magical thing where a fish becomes a monkey or anything like that. We are simply claiming that every single organism on Earth will adapt to the environmental pressures that it exists within.
I understand,
right?
Craig.
Whether that happens slowly or over a long time,
Craig.
You know, we can only test the hypothesis
Craig.
of it actually happening.
Greg, for an organism, whether it's multicellular or tiny and single, if an organism reacts to stimuli and adapts, isn't it the case that it has to first be itself? In other
It's
words,
itself because of the adaptions that it's previously had.
Hold on. For a larger animal like a cow to react to stimuli and respond to it accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't the cow have to already be a cow? Yes or no?
The cow is a cow because of its adaptation to stimuli.
So it wasn't a cow, and the reaction to stimuli made it a cow?
Yes.
Interesting. So what was it before it was a cow?
Whatever the ancestor of that was. I don't know the exact name.
Okay, this is science now. How do you prove that an external...
no, it's not science. You don't prove in science. Just so you're aware again.
Dude, I already established that we use that colloquially. How do you demonstrate that an external stimuli can be introduced to one organism type and the reaction over time is to become another organism?
Yeah, I already answered that by doing the E. coli experiment, or we can go back to the London Underground mosquitoes, which literally became a different
What's
species.
The new species?
It's a different species
what
of
is it
mosquitoes.
Called? Oh, it's a mosquito, but it's not a mosquito?
No, it's a completely different species.
Oh, it's a mosquito, but it's not a mosquito.
Like you and I are mammals, right? But we're very different.
So let's do it like we do on the Discovery Channel.
Cats and us are both mammals, but we're both very different.
Oh,
right?
Craig,
there's different species of mosquitoes, right? The point is, no, don't keep saying Craig when I'm talking. It's very I'm talking.
Hold on. One claim at a time.
Jim Bob, please.
One claim at a time,
I'm talking. I'm talking.
I asked
Jim
how...
Bob,
Dude, no,
Jim Bob, let me answer the question. I need to...
Sorry, guys.
Jim Bob, you asked me a question.
I'm so sorry. All right. Forgive me. First of all, I love both you guys. I appreciate you're both passionate. So if I ever sound cranky, I just hope you know I appreciate you guys, and I actually do appreciate your spiritedness. But just to be sure, do you guys want to do a different type of format? Like, let's say something like, 2 minute, back and forth. Do you want to go back to like a very strict
30 seconds?
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. That's cool.
Sure. I got the timer set.
Okay. So when you use the mosquito, the universal of mosquito maintains, even if the type of mosquito changes and can't procreate with the previous mosquito. When I brought up the cow, what you said was the cow was once not a cow. That's different than saying a mosquito has a different type of mosquito that follows, okay? Now you're making this giant leap between cow and a previous thing that wasn't a cow. And I asked, can you introduce something to the non-cow where the reaction to the stimuli, it becomes not a cow? And you said, we do it all the time. Look at these mosquitoes. And then you go on to say...
30 seconds is up.
Yeah. It's still called a mosquito because that's what we're calling it. We could call it something else. We are just still calling it a mosquito. We could change the name. We could call a proto-cow.
Can we call it a cow? Could we call the mosquito? Can we call the mosquito?
My 30 seconds.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I forgot about the format.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah. You can call it whatever you want. The fact is, it has become a different species. It is something that is unable to breed with the other mosquitoes. It probably should have a different name because it's no longer part of that same species. So, what was a cow? Before it was not a cow, it's just a name that we have given it. It is still a different species because of adaptations to environmental pressures.
It's still a part of like the mosquito family, though. Just because it's a different type of mosquito now, it doesn't mean that it's just a completely different, like totally different thing. So you could call it like a different type of mosquito. I don't know, the New York mosquito or something, whatever this experiment was done at. But it's not like this totally new species. The mosquito didn't all of a sudden become a fish.
Okay, it sounds like that under the evolutionary view, the term species is actually not an objective term. It's it's basically a nominalist view that there's only particular animals that are ever changing. And so when we point to a cow, we're only arbitrarily calling it a cow because it's actually in the process of changing to being not a cow, right?
Everything's changing. You're right. That's kind of the point that we had earlier, Jim Bob, is that everything is transitioning.
So Hinduism.
Because
so you're a Hindu.
I'd say I'm more of a Buddhist, if anything. I'm trying to be anyway. But the point is, everything is transitional because we are constantly changing. Humans, insects, fish, everything is constantly adapting to the.
Real quick, he said he's trying to be a Buddhist. I thought he was a secular humanist. He's always debating on secular humanism. Now he's trying to be a Buddhist? Ooh, Craig, what are you doing? What are you doing? What about your empathy?
Environmental pressures that we exist in. That's just a fundamental fact of life, and that's all evolution is. And that doesn't even go against God or anything, because God could have set that process in action. But the fact is, we do see species adapting to environmental pressures. You go back to Charles Darwin and the Galapagos Islands with the finches. Over the decades that he kept going back to that island, he saw that the finches change from one type of finch to another that then had a different name. It's not.
So if evolution has a contradiction in it, right?
There's no what's the contradiction?
The contradiction is to make the claim that evolution happens assumes these universal categories called species or populations of species.
Those are just names.
I understand. Hold on a second. If premise one is evolution relies on the assumptions of universal species, types of animals that are themselves and not other things, and premise two is there's no such thing as species, types of species, because everything's always changing, right? So these two can't coexist.
Well, let's just take the labels of species and everything out of it. It's kind of irrelevant. That's just biological terminology to try and identify things, right? The fact of it is, if you remove all the labels, what we see is every organism on Earth adapts to the environmental pressures that it lives in. If it doesn't do that, it dies.
Craig,
if it doesn't exist anymore, right? The species dies out, right?
Like progressives.
Okay, yeah, funny.
So that's 30 seconds. So if it's true that you could just as well call the next mosquito in your example not a mosquito, why would you assume the first one's a mosquito, Craig?
Because the mosquito is just a name that we gave it. It could be, and we could call it Fred. It really doesn't matter.
No,
right?
We're talking about the word.
That is just a name that we have given that particular thing.
We're not talking about the word mosquito. Okay, that's the symbol we use in sound. I'm not talking about that, Craig. I'm actually talking about the universal category of what a mosquito is. Now, when I point to a mosquito, Craig, are you saying that I'm actually not certain it's not a cat?
I mean, it's got genetic similarities to a cat. But
can I call a mosquito a cat?
If you want to call a mosquito a cat, you can do it. No one's going to stop you.
Under the evolutionary view, is it consistent to be able to call a mosquito a cat?
No.
Why not?
Because they are at this point different species, different.
That's a contradiction.
It's not. That's the thing. They are different.
Contradicted yourself.
Remove the word species. They are different organisms with different DNA that look and sound and act different. This particular setup of organs and skeletons and muscles and fibers and hair, we call that a cat, particularly Frisbee. That's my black cat. But this particular bundle of organs and fibers and probably some kind of exoskeleton or mosquito, right? We call that a mosquito, right? They are both, if we want to break it all down, they both exist of the same things. They're both made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. It's just the arrangement of them are different. And that arrangement of them is a particular arrangement because of the environmental pressures that it's existed in.
Craig, 30 seconds from Jim Bob.
Craig, if the particular arrangement is always changing, you don't have a universal arrangement of these things. That's a contradiction.
I never said there was a universal arrangement.
You said
I said we're all made
30
of
seconds.
the same
30
things.
seconds. 30 seconds, remember?
Yeah, sorry, I was just responding to you.
If the thing you're pointing to, you said we're all made of the same things, and it's just the way we're arranged. The atoms and molecules are arranged. Yeah. And this one thing called the cat is arranged in a certain way. But under evolution, it's actually not static. It's actually always changing. So it's actually a nominalist view. Hold on, I'm almost done. It means that the thing you're calling a cat actually isn't holding its identity over time. It's molecules and things are changing over time. And there never is a static thing called a cat. There's only a particular thing that happens to be arranged to look like this other thing called a cat. This is nominalist cringe, bro.
I mean, that's getting down to a little bit of philosophy and stuff, and I kind of understand your point. But the fact is that that particular arrangement of atoms and protons, neutrons, electrons exists because of the previous arrangement was a result of the environmental pressures that the previous arrangement, right? And these arrangements have created communities that then breed amongst themselves and create new arrangements. And we're all made of the same stuff, but the reason we exist in this particular form is because of our group of stuff adapting to environmental pressures in a particular way. Oh, we are stuff. Come on.
I know.
Jim Bob, you and I exist exactly the same. We are made.
Okay. Look, we're all stuff. You do science, I do science, we do science. I don't think Craig is going to get it here. Bottom line is this. What are your thoughts on evolution, or whatever your thoughts are on evolution or not? I think Craig didn't do evolution any favors by his explanations here. He keeps conflating adaptation with evolution. They're not the same thing. Adapting to something isn't the same as just evolving into something new. Bob's asking the good questions, but I don't think Craig is going to get it. But what did you guys think about this debate? How do you think Jim Bob did? How do you think Craig did? Sound off in the comment section below. Give this video a like if you liked it. And if you really liked it, please consider subscribing to my channel. You'll be really helping me out a lot. If you want to see more of Jim Bob and Craig, I got playlists of both of them that I think you guys could binge on, and a whole channel more of stuff that I think you guys will really enjoy. By the way, too, if you want to see the full debate, I have a link down in the description below where you can check it out on Modern Day Debates channel.